Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I just grabbed this out of my vinyl collection. I'm going to start doing that more often. I'm just going to make a short little response, reaction, quick thoughts video on this great album by Rod Stewart that came out in 1976, A Night on the Town. Look at him there, old Rod. He was always kind of playing a little bit of a boozer back in those days. I remember that. And I was a kid and they'd play that up in the media in like Cream Magazine. I don't think they do that today, but it's a pretty good album. You know, when I bought this, I remember the day I bought this, and I remember the stores in Union Lake, Michigan, a record store. And I don't think that record store was there for a year, but I bought it in there, and it was kind of an old 70s record store slash head shop. You know, they had various illicit accessories in there and a bunch of albums, and I bought this, and it's actually a pretty good album. You know, the one song that kind of made me buy this album is The First Cut Is the Deepest, which is Rod Stewart's cover of Cat Stevens, and it's an excellent cover. And I was a big Cat Stevens fan in the 70s, so as much as I like Cat Stevens, The First Cut Is the Deepest was one he kind of did in that earlier period when he was, you know, kind of a pop star before he, you know, Cat Stevens kind of was a pop star, and then he had that kind of health crisis. But The First Cut Is the Deepest was one of those old tracks that, you know, was from the early Cat Stevens, like Here Comes My Baby. And I thought Rod Stewart did it as well or better than Cat Stevens, actually, as much as I like Cat Stevens. But it's got Tonight's the Night. That was the one that was banned on several radio stations because of the line, spread your wings and let me, I don't even want to say it. But I just remember riding to the bus in high school, you know, all these 15 and 16-year-olds, and they played it a couple times on the bus. You know, she'd play. It was right when the song was really popular, and then it played a couple times. But then I remember once it came back on, and she turned it off. She turned the station, so she'd been alerted to the inappropriateness of the song. You know what? I was never too crazy about Tonight's the Night. You know, I think it kind of reflects something that. In a way, I'm less enamored with about Rod Stewart. You know, in the early 70s and late 60s, he was a great blues rock artist, you know. In fact, I remember when I first heard Rod Stewart, to me, I would have categorized him like Led Zeppelin or the Stones of the Exile on Main Streets type Stones, you know, that really kind of dark, dangerous Stones. You know, Gasoline Alley, Mott the Hoople, he was very glam rock. And by the end of the 70s, kind of like Elton John, by the end of the 70s, he'd become kind of a big celebrity. And, of course, the big definitive changeover song was Do You Think I'm Sexy, which, as much as I like Rod Stewart, I never quite forgave him for that one. But, you know, it was a disco song. But I think this is kind of transition. You know, he looks a little more presentable to a polite society here than he had on some of his earlier albums. He'd wear like sashes. You know, when I was a kid, he was one of the people they always said was androgynous. And I even remember some youth pastors mentioning his name along with David Bowie and Mick Jagger as representing the evils of homosexuality, which... you know, I'm not commenting on that, except I don't think that is Rod Stewart. He's one of several people that got accused of that sin, if you want to call that a sin. But I wouldn't say that was his sin. If he had a sexual sin, it was probably hundreds and hundreds of different women all the time, not homosexuality. But I don't know. I remember hearing about that. And he does have a song on here, The Killing of Georgie, which is a song about... a gay guy that was apparently one of his friends that was, you know, kicked out of his house, then was killed, kind of in a robbery, but also it seemed like kind of a, you know, gay violence type song. And I remember, you know what, that whole issue didn't seem as political back then as it does now. So the song, I remember, just kind of came across as kind of a song of social conscience and things. It didn't seem to have a big political edge like maybe a song like that today would have. But anyway, it's a nice enough song. It's got some other good ones on here. The First Cut Is the Deepest. Like I said, that might be one of my favorite Rod Stewart songs. And I'm a pretty big Rod Stewart fan. You know, I don't always know a lot of his album tracks, but I know quite a bit of Rod Stewart. Handbags and Glad Rags. I mean, he has some just terrific songs. I like his version of Pinball Wizard, but I think his cut of the first cut of Is the Deepest is just a terrific cover of that Cat Stevens song. He's got another one that's kind of racy called The Ball Trap. You know, Rod Stewart, you could get away with more in the 70s. It's got some pretty dirty lyrics, The Ball Trap. And another good one on here that's kind of a rocker is Pretty Flamingo. Yeah, but you know what? It's just a good album. I think it's a fine album. The other thing I'll say about it is he was playing. This is a Muscle Shoals album, and I've got those Cream magazines, and I bet I have the Cream magazine where I talk about it. But I read it in high school, and I remember him talking about he was using Muscle Shoals on some of his newer stuff, you know, and the Muscle Shoals was starting to do all kinds of pop music. I think right around this time, a lot of the same people that are on this played on Cat Stevens' album Is It So, which was also kind of a little bit more polished. But the Muscle Shoals guys, they gave him a little bit more of a commercial edge, I would say. So it's still the old kind of Rod Stewart, kind of bluesy, sometimes kind of rock good. You got some good rock and roll on here. Sometimes it gets a little boozy, a little raunchy lyrically. And, you know, you get some of the old Good Time Charlie rock and roll licks. You know, sounds a little bit sloppy on purpose, you know, like the Stones. They always sound kind of sloppy. Then if you listen to it, you realize there's not a bad note in that thing. It's not sloppy at all. But it sounds sloppy because it's so loose and it feels so good. Rod Stewart's got something like that. It sounds sloppy, and then when you listen to it, I say, why do I think that's sloppy? There's nothing sloppy at all about it. It's played great, but it's just so loose that it feels, maybe loose is a better word than sloppy. But it's got some on here like that. But it also, especially I think with that Tonight's the Night, it takes you in a little bit of a pop edge. And of course, the funny thing is, it was too racy of a song to really appeal to like 13-year-olds much. It was banned, I think, on a lot of radio stations. But nonetheless, it's a good song. And this is a good album. Got a picture of Rod Stewart there. On the inside cover, you've got Rod Stewart without his shirt on. Yeah, talk about Rod Stewart being, when I was a kid, I heard a couple youth group sermons about Rod Stewart and the sin of homosexuality. I'm not commenting on that, but I thought, you know, now that I'm older, I realize, I don't know, men weren't his problem. I think it might have been like a ton of women, kind of like Mick Jagger. But anyway, it's a good album. Yeah, it's got Pete Carr on guitar. You know, he's a good guitarist. It's got Reggie Young on guitar. You know, Reggie Young, I'm pretty sure, played that great guitar part on Drift Away. So he's got some of the great American players. I think that Reggie Young is also kind of associated with the Memphis studio, the Memphis sound. And you know who used to play on some of these sessions? I don't know if he's on this one, but he's on some Cat Stevens stuff around this time. Was Joe Walsh. You might see Joe Walsh appear a time or two in some of these old Muscle Shoals albums, but definitely a good album, you know. And I guess today you can hear all these songs on YouTube in a minute, so I don't know if you have a reason to buy the CD or something. But if you decide to add a nice Rod Stewart album to your vinyl collection, I definitely recommend it. It's got a nice cover. You get some, you know, it's a good album. Thanks a lot. God bless.